The floodwaters came at 3 a.m., just like I'd warned them they would. By dawn, the HOA's brand new access road had vanished, literally washed away, along with 2 parked cars, a section of privacy fence, and about 40 yards of landscaping. The damage exceeded $175,000. Gregory Marsh, our HOA vice president, stood in ankle-deep mud staring at the destruction while federal agents photographed the scene. He'd bulldozed straight through protected wetlands despite my warnings. What Gregory didn't understand was that wetlands aren't just protected by law, they're protected by physics, and Mother Nature always collects her debts. My name is Dr. Catherine Wells. I'm 70 years old, a retired wildlife biologist. I spent 36 years working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service studying wetland ecosystems across the Pacific Northwest. When my husband Paul died 8 years ago, I moved to Meadowbrook Estates, a small HOA community of 19 homes near Olympia, Washington, specifically because the property backed onto a pristine wetland ecosystem. The wetlands covered approximately 12 acres behind our development, designated as jurisdictional wetlands under the Clean Water Act. That means federal protection, you can't touch them without Army Corps of Engineers permits. The ecosystem was remarkable. Cattails and sedges, nesting red-winged blackbirds, wood ducks, even a great blue heron that returned every spring. The wetlands naturally absorbed storm runoff, filtering water before it reached Henderson Creek downstream. I'd bought my property knowing those wetlands would never be developed. It was in the original environmental assessment from 1998 when Meadowbrook was built. The developer had been required to maintain a 50-foot buffer zone. For 25 years, it had worked perfectly. Our HOA was quiet, minimal drama. We maintained the streets, organized an annual summer picnic, and kept dues low. Most residents were retirees who appreciated the wildlife. I'd given informal nature walks through the buffer zone, teaching neighbors about the ecosystem. Then, Gregory Marsh moved in 3 years ago. Gregory was 58, some kind of commercial real estate developer from Seattle, early retirement. He and his wife, Linda, bought the largest lot and immediately started improving everything. New fence, professional landscaping, outdoor kitchen. Within 6 months, he joined the HOA board as vice president. Gregory had opinions about everything. At his second meeting, he complained that the wetlands were swampy, mosquito-infested wastelands that lowered property values. Several of us pushed back, but Gregory smiled and moved on to other business. The first real trouble came on an October morning. I was photographing a hooded merganser when Gregory appeared on the walking trail with a surveyor. They were taking measurements along the wetland edge. "Morning, Catherine. Just evaluating some infrastructure improvements." "What kind of improvements?" I asked carefully. "Better access to the back lots, possibly a maintenance road." My stomach dropped. "Gregory, those are protected wetlands. You can't build there." He smiled. "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, Gregory presented his plan at the board meeting. He'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation, color maps, budget projections, timeline. 14 residents attended, our largest turnout in years. "I propose we construct an access road along the eastern property line," he announced, clicking to a map. "This will provide emergency vehicle access and increase property values by 15 to 20%. The proposed road cut directly through the wetland buffer zone. I raised my hand. "That area is federally protected wetlands. You'd need permits from the Army Corps of Engineers, which takes months and require environmental impact assessments. They'll likely deny it entirely." Gregory's smile tightened. "The actual wetlands are fine. We're only using the buffer zone, which is technically HOA property." The buffer exists specifically to protect the wetlands. Building there violates the Clean Water Act. "I've consulted with an attorney," Gregory said smoothly. "The buffer zone is a guideline, not a legal requirement. As long as we don't touch the cattails, we're within our rights." That was completely wrong, but several board members looked uncertain. Gregory had done his homework on persuasion, just not on environmental law. The board president, Ed Martinez, a 76-year-old retired accountant, cleared his throat. Catherine, you're sure about the legal issues? Absolutely certain. I worked with wetlands law for 36 years. If you build that road, federal agencies will shut it down and fine the HOA, possibly criminal penalties. Gregory laughed, actually laughed. With all respect to Catherine's experience, environmental regulations have changed significantly. My attorney specializes in property development. I think I'll trust his assessment. The board voted. 4 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. My stomach churned. I filed a complaint with the Army Corps of Engineers the next morning, providing maps, photos, and the original 1998 environmental assessment. They responded within a week. We are reviewing your complaint. Any construction in jurisdictional wetlands without permits violates 338 CFR 328. We will investigate. I forwarded the email to the entire HOA board. Gregory replied to everyone. Federal agencies always send boilerplate warnings. Actual enforcement is rare. We're proceeding as planned. Construction began in March. A contractor Gregory hired brought in equipment and started clearing vegetation along the proposed route. I watched through binoculars from my back deck as they ripped at willows, flattened sedges, and graded soil. Each day, the scar through the buffer zone grew wider. I called the Corps of Engineers again. They're actively destroying wetlands. We have an inspector scheduled for next week, the woman said apologetically. We're understaffed. By the time the inspector arrived, Gregory had rushed the work. The road was nearly complete. Gravel base, drainage culverts, the whole thing. The inspector, a young man named Travis, looked horrified. This is definitely jurisdictional wetlands, he said, taking photos. They needed permits. This is a major violation. What happens now? I asked. We issue a cease and desist and start the enforcement process. But honestly, ma'am, it takes months, maybe years. Gregory received the cease and desist order 3 days later. At the next board meeting, he waved it dismissively. Legal posturing. By the time they actually do anything, this will be a completed amenity that increases all our property values. You'll thank me. Several residents applauded. I sat there feeling sick, watching the place I loved being destroyed by arrogance and greed. The wetlands were dying, and nobody seemed to care except me.
The road was finished by late April. Gregory organized a small ribbon-cutting ceremony, which felt obscene. He stood there with champagne, celebrating the destruction of a protected ecosystem. I walked around the area that evening. The damage was worse up close. The drainage culverts Gregory had installed were undersized and positioned incorrectly. I'd seen enough wetland engineering to recognize shoddy work. The gravel base sat directly on compacted fill, blocking natural water flow. The vegetation that had absorbed storm runoff for thousands of years was gone, replaced by an impermeable surface. But the breaking point came 3 days later. I found a heron dead near the edge of the remaining wetlands, the great blue that had nested there for 8 consecutive years. She was tangled in survey flagging tape, one wing broken, probably from panicking when the construction equipment had destroyed her nesting area. I knelt in the mud, carefully untangling the tape from her body. She'd been magnificent, nearly 4 feet tall, slate blue feathers, yellow eyes that had watched me with curious intelligence every spring. Now she was limp and cold in my hands. I sat there crying for 20 minutes, not just for the heron, but for the wood duck nests bulldozed, the salamander breeding pools buried under gravel, the entire ecosystem disrupted by one man's arrogance. When I stood up, something had changed inside me. I'd spend my entire career protecting places like this, through proper channels, research, reports, regulations, but Gregory Marsh didn't care about regulations. Fine, I document every violation, build an airtight case, And wait, because I knew something Gregory didn't. The Pacific Northwest rainy season was coming, and without those wetlands to absorb the water, his precious road was about to become a very expensive lesson in hydrology. I spent the next 2 months preparing, not for revenge, for accountability. First, I documented everything. I photographed the destroyed buffer zone from multiple angles, comparing them to photos from previous years. I created a detailed map showing exactly how the road intersected jurisdictional wetlands with GPS coordinates. I collected the dead heron and 2 other bird casualties and reported them to Fish and Wildlife. Killing migratory birds, even accidentally, violates the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Second, I pulled all relevant regulations: the Clean Water Act, 333 CFR 328 on wetlands jurisdiction, the Rivers and Harbor Act, state water quality standards. I compiled a 40-page document outlining each specific violation with photographic evidence. This was an amateur hour. This was a professional environmental assessment. Third, I contacted everyone who mattered: the EPA Regional Office, Washington State Department of Ecology, the County Environmental Health Department, even the National Marine Fisheries Service, since Henderson Creek downstream had endangered salmon. I provided each agency with complete documentation. The EPA responded first. They sent a senior investigator, a woman named Dr. Reeves, who had worked wetlands enforcement for 15 years. We walked the site together. "This is egregious," she said quietly, photographing the culverts. "These aren't just undersized, they're actively blocking natural hydrology. When the winter rains hit—" "I know," I said. "That's what I tried to tell them." She looked at me seriously. "You understand this road is going to fail catastrophically. Those wetlands absorbed massive amounts of water. Now it has nowhere to go except over this road and into the properties downslope." "I know," I repeated. "I've tried warning them 5 times, in writing." Dr. Reeves nodded slowly. "Make sure you have documentation of those warnings. When this goes sideways, you want clear evidence you tried to prevent it." Fourth, I checked the weather forecasts religiously. The National Weather Service was predicting an unusually wet fall. Atmospheric rivers, sustained rainfall, possibly record-breaking totals. The first major system was scheduled for late October. I sent one final email to Gregory and the entire HOA board on October 18th. The upcoming rain system will overwhelm the inadequate drainage on the new access road. The destroyed wetlands can no longer absorb storm runoff. I predict significant flooding and possible road failure. Please prepare accordingly and contact emergency management. Gregory's response came 30 minutes later. "Your scare tactics are noted. The road was engineered by professionals. It will be fine." I printed that email and put it in my folder. Then I waited for the rain. The atmospheric river hit on October 24th. Rain started around 6 p.m., steady, heavy, relentless. By midnight, we'd received 3 inches. By 2 a.m., 5 inches. I stayed awake, watching the weather radar on my laptop. At 2:47 a.m., I heard the first rumbling. Not thunder. Water. Massive volumes of water flowing where they shouldn't. I grabbed my raincoat and flashlight and went to the back window. Even in the darkness and rain, I could see it. Water was sheeting across the old wetlands with nowhere to absorb, nowhere to filter, and slamming directly into Gregory's road like a river hitting a dam. The undersized culverts couldn't handle even a fraction of the flow. Water poured over the road surface, carrying gravel with it. I watched through binoculars as the road began to disintegrate, chunks of base material washing away. Then the catastrophic failure happened. The largest culvert collapsed completely, probably undermined by the flow. A 10-foot section of road simply vanished into a roaring torrent. The water, now completely uncontrolled, surged downslope directly toward the homes on Meadowbrook Lane, including Gregory's. I called 911. "This is Dr. Catherine Wells, 412 Meadowbrook Court. We have severe flooding from failed infrastructure. Multiple homes may be at risk."
By 4 a.m., emergency vehicles filled the street. Residents evacuated 2 homes. Gregory stood in his driveway in a bathrobe, watching muddy water flow past his landscaping, carrying pieces of his destroyed fence. His wife's car, parked near the road, was halfway submerged. By dawn, the damage was staggering. The access road had completely washed out, 2 cars totaled, 4 properties with flood damage. Gregory's professionally landscaped yard was buried under a foot of mud and gravel. And standing in the middle of it all, taking photographs and samples, were investigators from the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the State Department of Ecology. Dr. Reeves approached Gregory with a clipboard. "Mr. Marsh, I'm Dr. Angela Reeves, EPA. This flooding was caused by illegal alteration of jurisdictional wetlands. We have documentation showing you were warned multiple times about the consequences. You're being cited for violations of the Clean Water Act, unpermitted discharge of fill material, destruction of protected habitat, and negligent environmental damage." Gregory's face went pale. "I had legal advice. Your attorney is not an environmental specialist," Dr. Reeves said flatly. "Restoration will be required at your expense. Federal fines start at $37,500 per day of violation. This has been ongoing for 7 months." I watched from my deck as Gregory did the math. His expression shifted from shock to horror. Mother Nature had spoken, and she brought federal law enforcement. The final accounting took almost a year. Gregory and the HOA were jointly liable for $423,000 in fines, restoration costs, and damages. The HOA's insurance denied coverage for willful environmental violations, leaving Gregory personally responsible for most of it. The Army Corps of Engineers supervised the restoration. Professional wetlands contractors removed every trace of the illegal road, regraded the area to original contours, and replanted native vegetation. Sedges, cattails, willows, everything. It took 4 months and cost $180,000. The EPA added their own penalties, $37,500 in fines, plus Gregory was required to fund a 10-year wetland monitoring program to ensure recovery. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act violations added another $12,000. Gregory resigned from the HOA board immediately. He and Linda sold their house 9 months later, at a significant loss. I heard he took a job in Arizona, somewhere very, very dry. The HOA elected new leadership. Our new president was Marie Chen, a retired environmental attorney who actually understood why those wetlands mattered. Her first action was creating an environmental protection policy requiring expert review before any construction near sensitive areas. 2 springs after the restoration, the great blue heron returned. Not the same individual, she was gone, but a younger bird, probably her offspring. She nested in the same area her mother had used. I cried watching her fish in the restored shallows. The wetlands recovered beautifully. Native plants flourished, frogs returned, the wood ducks nested again. The ecosystem proved resilient once we stopped destroying it. I still take my morning walks through the buffer zone. The evidence of Gregory's Road is gone, erased by nature's healing. New residents sometimes ask why we have such strict rules about the wetlands. I tell them the whole story. Most listen carefully. Looking back, I don't feel victorious. What I feel is relief. Relief that the wetlands survived and the law held someone accountable. Gregory's mistake wasn't just breaking regulations. It was fundamental arrogance, believing human engineering could overwrite natural systems that have worked perfectly for thousands of years. Wetlands aren't decorative features. They're functional ecosystems that manage water, support biodiversity, and protect communities. When you destroy them, there are consequences, sometimes legal, sometimes natural, usually both. I learned that expertise matters, but so does patience. I couldn't stop the initial destruction, but I could document it, build an airtight case, and let nature prove me right. The wetlands defended themselves more effectively than any lawyer ever could. Most importantly, respect the natural world. It's not an obstacle to development. It's infrastructure we couldn't afford to build ourselves. Those wetlands provided millions of dollars worth of flood control for free. We just had to leave them alone. Thanks for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd appreciate a subscription. Protecting our environment starts with understanding its value. Take care.